of Stevens. You have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Well, allow me to just say, Madam Chair, I am so grateful to you for having this hearing, examining the policies and priorities of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, in part because the legislation that was enacted in 1970 was certainly very important, and now we find ourselves, half a century later, still in the middle of a global pandemic, looking at the ways in which we can modernize and improve. And that's what today's hearing is about. So often in the Congress, we run into these very type of matters, how we are operating off of laws that were written half a century ago that need to be tweaked, that need to be modernized, that need to be improved. Tweak might be too docile of a term. So Doug Parker, our Assistant Secretary of Labor here, Mr. Parker, Secretary Parker, in the OSHA budget's justification, it mentions increasing the diversity of the agency's workforce by creating an apprenticeship program that will develop safety technicians into entry-level COSHOs and recruiting for those positions from HBCUs, MSIs, veterans networks, and other organizations. Can you explain for us, sir, how the creation of the apprenticeship program will help OSHA increase diversity in its workforce and fulfill its mission to protect workers?
I'd be happy to. First of all, let me note that we're already working hard to increase the diversity of this organization. We've done a considerable amount of hiring. We actively work to recruit at HBCUs and through associations made up of workers of color, women, and so we're actively working to do that. We've also worked recently very closely with the Office of Personnel Management to obtain, for a limited period, direct hire authority, so that we can go to conferences, we can go to colleges, and we can virtually hire on the spot, so that we can really build up our ranks and do it quickly with the inspectorate. Yeah. With respect to the apprenticeship program, this is really to get non-traditional folks who maybe don't have all the degrees, who didn't take organic chemistry to become an IH, for example, who we can bring in because they have on-the-job experience. They have a different set of experiences that is still extremely relevant for the strong work of OSHA. They can come onto they can come in as a safety tech, and we can train them on the job and give them the skills they need to.
Well, on-the-job training is phenomenal, Mr. Secretary, and we really want to applaud you. And on a separate but more urgent note, the Surgeon General released an advisory on healthcare worker burnout and resignation because the healthcare system is becoming more fragile and less able to serve the people as workers in the system get driven to the edge, just to the I've worked too much and I don't know if I can actually fulfill the mission of my job. So organizations, communities, and policies must prioritize protecting health workers from workplace violence, right? That's a point I want to stress. Quote, in the national survey among healthcare workers in mid-2021, 8 out of 10 experienced at least one type of workplace violence during the pandemic, and 2/3 have been verbally threatened, and 1/3 of nurses reporting an increase in violence compared to the previous year. This is legislation we've also worked on as a committee. So when can we expect OSHA to follow up on the Surgeon General's recommendation, Secretary Parker, and update its policies by publishing a proposed rule on workplace violence?
So the next step in that process, our priority right now is to finish the COVID-19 rule and to work on an infectious disease in healthcare, but it's not keeping us from doing other work. So this fall, we'll take on the next step of the workplace violence standard. We'll be having a meeting to do the SBREFA process, the Small Business Fairness Act process, to hear from small businesses that would be affected by that rule. So that's coming up in the fall. I don't have an exact date in front of me on a proposed rule, but we're working. We'll be working very diligently on that.
Yeah, well, we'll do whatever we can, sir, to support you to get that addendum going, and certainly appreciate the dialogue and the service to the nation. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm yielding back. Thank you for the hearing.